hearty welcome to Grandma's Wealth Wisdom with your hospitable hosts, Brandon and Amanda Neely. This is the only podcast for strategies to grow your wealth simply and sustainably, like Grandma used to. Without further ado, here are your hosts.
Hi, I'm Amanda, and welcome to Grandma's Wealth Wisdom, where we work with you to build wealth Grandma would be proud of.
And I'm Brandon. So before we jump into today's episode, I want to add a segment to our podcast all about reviews. First, I want to share a review that we got from one of our listeners. The title is Great Concept and Quality Content by Steph0385. She says, I just listened to the first episode. It was great. Very cool. The dynamics between you and your wife. Great conversation and love the concept of grandma. Thanks, Steph0385, for your review.
Yeah, as you know, ratings and reviews and subscribers are super helpful. They help us know that we're making an impact through our podcast, and reviews also help the various algorithms get the podcast to more people.
Those crazy algorithms.
Yeah, the iTunes, Google, they look at these kind of things and they'll share it with more people the more reviews and ratings and subscribers that you have. So we decided that we're not beyond bribing you. We have a deal. If you leave us a honest 5-star review, we'll share it on the podcast. But we also want to make the deal a little bit sweeter. All you have to do is take a picture of your review and send it to our email, hello@grandmaswealthwisdom.com. And then we'll send you a copy of the best-selling book by Pamela Yellen. The book's called The Bank on Yourself Revolution. So as long as you're in the United States, we'll send you a copy in the mail or the Kindle version, your choice. You just have to write that honest 5-star review and send a screenshot of that review to hello@grandmaswealthwisdom.com, and you'll get the book for free.
So today, we are continuing the tale of the two grandmas that we started in the last episode. So we encourage you to go back and listen to that episode to get the full details if you want their backstory.
Which you do.
Yeah, you want their backstory.
Please go listen to that episode if you haven't listened to it yet.
But we will refresh your memory a little bit if it's been a while since you listened. So the grandmas are Margaret and Mildred because, you know, when you have twins, you name your twins, you know, the same M's
sometimes,
or T's or whatever.
Not everybody.
So Margaret and Mildred. And they're twins born in 1930. In the last episode, we told the story up to 1980. The first 50 years looked about the same for them. So they both, in their story, everything looked about the same for the first 50 years. They both grew up during the Great Depression and learned how to live simply. They both also, I think, married twins, Tim and Ted, which
Brendan added to the story.
Is weird how twins marry twins and then they live next door. I don't know. They were strange, Margaret and Mildred. Also, they both had steady jobs and worked their way from secretary to executive assistant.
Yeah, and as we shared in the last episode, the big change came in 1980 when their employers started to offer the 401k. Margaret decided to increase her savings. She had been saving 30%. She increased her savings to 33%, and she put that extra 3% into the 401k so that she could get the 3% match offered by the law firm that she worked at. Mildred decided to shift her savings. Just like Margaret, she'd been saving 30%, and she decided 10% we're going to leave that where it is, just going into a regular savings account for short-term expenses. But the other 20%, she wanted to move into this 401k. And the place she had been saving it was a whole life insurance policy. So she shifted that savings of her income, and she even cashed out that policy. Just totally decided to close it out, take the cash that had built up there. And with that cash, she opened up a brokerage account, put that money into the stock market as well. She wanted to play in the big leagues like the wealthy clients of the accounting firm for which she worked. She had seen how they do this kind of thing, and she wanted to do the same thing. So she changed her strategy.
So today we're starting to look at how this actually worked out for them? How did it work out for both Margaret and Mildred? So at first, Mildred was doing great. Lots of other average Americans were getting into the stock market through the 401k and other plans like it. So stocks seemed to be climbing in value like crazy. It's what we've referred to in a previous episode as the Roaring 20. The stock market acted like it never had before during the time between 1980 and 2000. Margaret saw a little bit of this spectacular growth because of her 3% and her employer's match, but definitely not as much as Mildred. It seemed at this point Mildred was the winner here.
Yeah, Margaret and Mildred, they decided to retire the same year. So did their husbands. What were their names? Tim and Ted. Yeah. And both of their families, Margaret and Mildred and Tim and Ted, they decided to downsize and move next door to each other so that they could do fun things together in retirement. They're super excited. And at this point, Margaret and Mildred were both 65 years old, and it was 1995. They both started to get Social Security, but of course, Social Security wasn't enough. Even back then, it wasn't enough to give them the lifestyle they wanted. And as you expect, that Margaret and Mildred both sat down with their financial advisors. So Mildred with her 401k and her brokerage account, she sat down with her financial advisors, and she actually had a lot more money there than Margaret had in her 401k that she'd only been contributing the 3% plus the employer match 3%, and then the cash value in her whole life policies. So when Mildred and her husband, when they sit down with their financial advisor, they, are talking about they love the market. They've seen a lot of dramatic things happen. Their money has skyrocketed in the last 15 years since they started, doing things in the market, and they loved it. So their advisor recommended that they follow this 4% rule that a lot of advisors follow. And basically that meant that they were going to start to withdraw 4% from their 401k account each year to cover their expenses. And then the brokerage account could be their emergency fund in case of an emergency. And this worked out really well. They'd have the Social Security, they'd have that 4% from their 401k, that they felt good. They could do the things that they dreamed about in retirement.
Grandma always said, eat your vegetables. She loved making home-cooked meals with healthy food and from-scratch desserts. Would you create a diet of fast food or cookie-cutter financial products that made you fat and bloated with fees? Or would you like wholesome, time-honored wealth strategies served with balance and trust? Get started with your healthy money planning by downloading Wholesome Wealth Recipes. Your Moolah cookbook is waiting for you at grandmaswealth.com.
Similarly, Margaret and her husband met with their financial advisor as well. And, they had a little bit in the market through their 401k, but most of their funds were in this cash value whole life insurance policy. And they expressed to their advisor that their concern is for safety. That's why they liked how they had set things up. They wanted to make sure that their money was safe, that they wouldn't lose it. And so their advisor actually recommended that they move their 401k outside of the market. And so they had their life insurance policy already, and they could use that for some income and distributions to help, do some fun things in retirement. And it was there, for the original purpose of life insurance, the death benefit, that kind of thing. But that 401k balance, they actually used to purchase an annuity, which if you're not familiar with annuities, the basic summary of it is that it's insurance for living too long. But the other way to think about it when it comes to retirement income is that with an annuity, you can continue to get money distributed to you year after year, even when your account balance reaches zero. I'm going to say that again because it's kind of like hard to believe, right? That even when Margaret's account value would reach $0. She has $0 left in her annuity. She could still have money distributed to her every single year after year after year. And that amount could actually increase over time too, even though her account balance is at zero. That's how annuities work. We could talk to, if you want to learn more about annuities, there's plenty of ways to do that. We would also love to share with you what we've learned about them, but that's not the point here. The point is
the story.
Let's go back to it.
So fast forward 10 years later to 2005, Margaret and Mildred are 75. Unexpectedly, their husbands both pass away within a couple years of each other.
Weeks.
Or weeks of each other, not years, weeks. They were twins, and twins kind of follow suit with each other.
Sometimes.
So Tim and Ted both passed away, and Margaret gets a big lump sum payout from the whole life insurance policy that she had on her husband. She was able to use this money to cover his final expenses and then to continue to cover her own living expenses, living cost. Mildred only gets a few $100s from Social Security to cover her husband's death and then loses the Social Security income he had been receiving because she had too much income of her own, both her own Social Security and the required minimum distribution from the 401k. Oh, and by the way, Mildred's 401k is much smaller than it used to be. And not just because she'd taken money out of it to live, all those gains she got in the 1990s were erased during the dot-com crash of the early 2000s.
Yeah, so that's 2005. They're 10 years into retirement. And then over the next 13 years, Margaret and Mildred, as widows, live very different lives. Mildred is afraid to spend much of her money at all because she has no clue what's going to happen in the market. And she has every reason to be scared, too. We all know what happened to her 401k and brokerage accounts in 2008. They were almost cut in half, and she still had to take money out of it at that low point in order to cover her expenses. Mildred's financial life is stressful. She has money in her 401k and brokerage account. There's still money there, but she's always afraid to use it. She's always worried if she uses it. What if the stocks crumble? What if she needs more income due to inflation, or if she gets a chronic illness? What is she going to do? That's the life that Mildred is living between, 2015 and 2018.
So I'd love to hear about Margaret, though.
Right.
How is she doing?
Margaret, very different. She knows exactly how much she can work with and proceeds with her lifestyle without a worry, no matter what's happening on the stock market. Her annuity is guaranteed to send her money every single year without fail. She's able to use the cash value of her life insurance policy. She has the lump sum from her husband's death benefit. She's still getting Social Security. And actually, she gets more because less of her income is reportable on her taxes, that kind of thing. In fact, Margaret has so much money, she isn't quite sure what to do with it sometimes, especially because she keeps inviting Mildred to go do fun things, but Mildred keeps saying no because she's not sure she can afford to do those things. And so Margaret doesn't want to do them on her own, and it's this constant tension between the two of them.
So another cliffhanger here. This concludes Margaret and Mildred's story with money. They're two different lives here. You might see similarities in their stories with your own parents' or grandparents' stories, or even possibly your own story. The most important question to ask is this: what can I learn from Margaret and Mildred as I am writing my own story on money? I mean, you're in the midst of writing your own story right now. How would you like your story to be told? How would you like it to be different? Our encouragement to you is that it's never too late to close one chapter of your story and start a new one. In other words, it's never too late to make a course correction. Your story with money will continue being written, whether you do something to start a new chapter or further the wealth building storyline or not. Whatever you do, it's going to continue. And we'd love to see how we might be able to help you write your story more proactively. It starts with a simple phone call to chat a little with no obligation or sales pitch. So to schedule a call, visit grandmaswealthwisdom.com and click Request a Meeting.
We honestly look forward to talking to you more and learning more about what your story looks like so far and what you'd like your story to look like in the future. And of course, there's way more to Margaret and Mildred's stories as well, including what happens in the aftermath when these twins get their wings in 2018. So we're going to be telling the story of a tale of two grandchildren in the next two episodes. So be sure you subscribe and tune in next time to hear what happens to Margaret and Mildred's grandchildren, Michael and Matthew.
And they're not twins.
They're not twins. One is Margaret's grandson. The other is Mildred's grandson.
Gotcha. So until next time, keep building your wealth simply and sustainably for your own future and the future of our grandchildren's generation. The topics presented in this podcast are for general information only and not for the purpose of providing legal, accounting, or investment advice. On such matters, please consult a professional who knows your specific situation.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.